Hey guys, what's going on? Blaine back for another Netflix review, and today I'm going to be talking about The Witcher: Nightmare of the Wolf. Nightmare of the Wolf is an anime action film that serves as a prequel to the Witcher series at large and tells the story of a young Witcher named Vesemir, who you may recognize as a central character in other forms of Witcher media. Vesemir travels across the continent slaying monsters in exchange for money as part of a creed that he and other Witchers follow called the Path. On one occasion, however, he encounters a monster that is unlike any he's ever seen before, which leads him to suspect that someone in the world is taking already dangerous monsters and combining them together into even more dangerous crossbreeds. At the same time, he and the other Witchers who all reside in the fortress of Kaer Morhen have to put up with an increasingly hostile human population that is dead set on exterminating them from the face of the earth, and this leads to a dual conflict throughout the story as Vesemir tries to investigate who's behind the crossbreeds while also protecting his culture from human politics. So before I continue on with the rest of this review, I just want to preface things first by saying that I'm going to be approaching this from a casual fan's perspective. I have played The Witchers 2 and 3, the video games, and I've also watched the TV series that is also on Netflix, but I haven't read any of the books, so I'm not quite as familiar with the lore as others might be. So as long as you don't mind that aspect of things, feel free to keep watching. Even though I'm only familiar with the franchise at a basic level, I've still been able to pick up a lot of details from it, and I enjoyed how this movie added more backstory and breathed more life into the franchise through its story and especially characters. I remember Vesemir being one of the more mysterious characters I encountered in my time with the franchise thus far, and I always wanted to learn more about him, so I think featuring him as the main protagonist of this movie story was a wise choice. Through Vesemir's eyes, we get to see what the world was like before the rest of this franchise's media takes place, as well as what Vesemir is like as a character overall, both when he was a kid undergoing the trials of being a Witcher and what his life is like a Witcher afterward. The movie goes back and forth between the two, so there's a pretty even split of backstory for both time periods. I like how this movie portrayed Vesemir to have different personalities depending on how old he was on screen. When he's young, he's portrayed as hopeful and optimistic, and when he's older, he's cocky and arrogant, but still has some sense of good nature about him. The Vesemir that I remember from The Witcher 3 was portrayed as gruff, grouchy, and had a bit of a chip on his shoulder, and after seeing the events which take place in this movie, it makes total sense why he is the way he is in the end. The character Ilyana adds further depth to Vesemir's personality as well. She's his childhood friend slash lover in the same village that they both grew up in, and she wants Vesemir to fulfill his dream of leaving his hometown behind and living a life of adventure, but she doesn't want him to follow the path of being a Witcher. And this conflicts with his own ideals as well, because he feels that despite its hardships, the path to being a Witcher is the only answer he has to resolving his predicament, which is his boring, miserable life that he desperately wants to escape from. His relationship with fellow Witcher Deglin added even more depth and nuance to his character. He ends up being the kickstarter for Vesemir's journey in the first place, as well as serving as a mentor and father figure for him throughout the story. Deglin's presence alone makes this movie worth watching. He provides a ton of lore regarding the history of the Witchers for those who've ever wondered about it, and it was really interesting to see how his relationship with Vesemir changed and evolved over the course of the story. I don't think this movie's story and characters would have been quite as effective if this movie wasn't an anime from the outset. The live action series is great for what it is, but the animation in this movie goes to a totally different level at making this franchise come to life. And I know I already said that once or twice in this review already, but it bears emphasizing in this case. The animation is breathtaking. There were quite a few times when this movie reminded me about Castlevania. It has its fair share of violent set pieces with blood and guts gushing all over the screen, body parts flying everywhere, and it also has its fair share of more quiet moments throughout the story with breathtaking vistas and somber soundtracks that give the viewer a break from all the craziness. There's a variety of creatures featured in the action set pieces as well, ranging from Mars to Leshens and from basilisks to wraiths. Every creature gets their time to shine in this movie, and it was great to see so much variety as far as the action was concerned, especially when Vesemir starts drinking potions and using magic spells to combat the creatures. Aside from the entertainment value of the action scenes though, I just liked the lore that it added to the franchise. I enjoyed learning about the history of Kaer Morhen and how it came to be in the first place and how the Witchers maintained their lifestyle over the years. It provided more context for me to understand them as a species that I previously didn't have when I was playing the video games or watching the TV series. The movie definitely benefits from being a prequel, and I appreciate how the filmmakers were able to condense this franchise's lore to a more digestible format for the average viewer to a certain extent, but there were still a few things I noticed while watching this movie that reduced its enjoyability for me to a certain extent. I think that the main villain, Tetra Gilchrist, was pretty lackluster overall. She's not really horrible per se, there's just not a whole lot I can say about her personality and character-wise, other than that she's a generic bigot who, for some reason, has a vendetta against witchers. I also think it's weird how this movie glossed over details about the dwarves and the elves featured in this franchise's world, especially the elves, because there's an elf character in this movie that's supposed to be a good friend of Vesemir's, but he only appears in like 2 scenes, and only one of them is truly substantial. I don't know, I just think it's a shame that this movie missed an opportunity to explore the other minority races more in depth, as opposed to just focusing solely on the witchers. And finally, and I know I'm probably going to get flack for saying this, but I thought that the Geralt Easter egg that was featured in this movie was super lame. And I know that he's not the main character in this movie. Vesemir is supposed to be the star of the show, and that's all well and good, but I'm sorry, the way that they handled Geralt in this movie was so disappointing. Overall, despite some hiccups, Nightmare of the Wolf is a great prequel to the franchise and an excellent start for newcomers who don't want to be overwhelmed with too much exposition. If you're into hard fantasy and anime and you're looking for a way to get introduced to this franchise, this movie is definitely for you. This movie made me want to replay The Witcher 3 all over again. It has excellent production value, expands the lore of the franchise in an approachable manner, and it demonstrates that Geralt isn't the only Witcher worth tossing a coin to. Anyways guys, that's going to wrap up my review of The Witcher Nightmare of the Wolf. Thanks for watching this video, I hope you enjoyed it, and as always stay tuned for the next part, where next time I review the documentary Bob Ross, Happy Accidents, Betrayal and Greed. Bye bye!